Joining me now is contributor for GB News and Talk Radio in the UK, political commentator Darren Grimes is one of our favourites. Good evening, Darren.
Good morning here. Yes, Rita. Hi.
Thank you for staying up or getting up early. Now, let's start with Greta Thunberg. She says that she doesn't regard Scotland as a world leader on climate change, but agrees that some politicians are less worse than others. This comes after the Scottish Government had previously described their target to reach net zero by 2045 as world leading. Are the Scots a little bit upset with the criticism from Saint Greta, or are they inspired to do better?
Oh, I imagine Nicola Sturgeon is very upset. Nicola Sturgeon is a politician that constantly tweets Jacinda Ardern, for example, trying to get her attention. Because the whackery and wokery in New Zealand very much appeals to the Scottish leader. I was just listening to what's going on in Victoria there, and it actually really does remind me of what's happening in Scotland, because you look at Scotland and you're struck by the madness and how it just feels like it's becoming a different country, which is exactly what Nicola Sturgeon wants it to be, but she's dragging it off to whackery and wokery land, not the land of the enlightened that it once was. But look, I think Greta, perhaps she is right, that sort of embodiment of the teenage tantrum in saying that it's a lie to say the UK is a climate leader, and in saying Scotland isn't a world leader on climate change, has raised actually some really important points, in my eyes, on the inconsistencies in the pursuit of that asphyxiating net zero target, for example. Because, Rita, as you well know, as you document on this show, whilst China burns coal at an unprecedented pace, right, the UK has actually cut its carbon emissions faster than any other developed country, 40% since I was born. And you used to think, well, Greta says it's a lie to say we've gone green or we're going green, whilst Extinction Rebellion cost the taxpayer millions of quid in police time and resources. They've brought parts of London, for example, over the last 2 weeks to a complete standstill where people can't get to and from work. And you have to ask yourself, what is it that they actually want? And I think the answer to that question is that they won't be happy until, Rita, you and I are crawling around in caves in loincloths. And even then, they'll probably say the natural environment is left unscathed. They are absolutely insane. And their prescription, were it to be accepted by Nicola Sturgeon and her new Green colleagues, she's just signed a coalition agreement with the Green Party in Scotland.
Oh, look, Darren, that can't be satisfied. I mean, this is...
No.
They cannot be satisfied. And talking about Extinction Rebellion, I was quite pleased to see police take action against them, because we've seen in the last couple of weeks these massive structures they construct in middle of intersections to disrupt traffic. And they were about to do that when the police pounced. Have a look at this footage. Not on my watch, thank you very much. What do you think of that? Are the police changing their tune with Extinction Rebellion a little bit, or are they essentially doing as they like, causing mass disruption?
So the Metropolitan Police put out a statement when it was announced that Extinction Rebellion would be 2 weeks of protest, that actually it was an important protest. They said, and I actually think that that's I actually think that that's a really worrying thing to say, because on 3 previous significant events by this green unwashed acolyte of Greta Thunberg, the Extinction Rebellion activists actually cost the taxpayer, through the Metropolitan Police, more than 50 million quid. So if this is an important use of taxpayer money, Rita, I want to know why we're not spending more money on tackling knife crime, gang violence in London, which is rife, which is the real pandemic as far as London's concerned. And if you look at the fact, right, that Extinction Rebellion, the co-founder of Extinction Rebellion, admitted that she doesn't drive an electric car because, guess what, Rita? She can't afford one. And yet they want to ensure their prescription would mean that the very poorest in society can't take holidays abroad, can't buy cheap food in supermarkets, can't afford to pay their gas and electric bills. These proselytizers of all things green, it's one rule for them and quite another for all of the rest of us. And that's what I think gets people, taxpayers like me, so angry about the fact that the police aren't focusing on everything that matters to the people on the ground, which is ensuring that kids leave the houses safe, that they are safe from harm and from gang violence.
And I'm sure you meant that the pandemic of knife crime, you weren't saying that COVID isn't a pandemic, because we don't want the crazy people to read anything into that. So it was just a reference to climate change not being a pandemic in the streets of London. You mentioned taxpayer money. This interesting note about Scotland, which is having a census in 2022, but they're allowing people taking part to nominate if they're male or female based on how they're feeling that day, on how they identify that day, not according to their legal status. Now, this has caused a bit of a stir. Can you just tell me what the problem with that is? Why can't people who feel female say I'm a female?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that you're talking about this, Rita, because I do actually think it's really important, and hardly any other broadcasters are willing to talk about this issue. But this is where I think gender ideology and that wackery and wokery that underpins it has actually led us, because a census is a data collection exercise which should be completely removed from politics, right? It's not in Scotland now. It's very much is politicized. And I think that's dangerous for several reasons. It's so social scientists, for example, can actually ensure that they have the correct data, and that so society and planners can actually make sure that we've got everything that we need, that men get what they need, that women get what they need. Because, as in a Sunday Times letter when this was proposed in the past for the whole of the UK, almost 100 academics noted that this guidance would effectively transform the sex question into one in gender identity, and therefore undermine data reliability on a key demographic variable. So it's a polite way of saying, basically, Rita, that sex on the census is important so that healthcare providers know that who will get prostate cancer, for example, which is limited to biological men, how many women will get cervical cancer, which is, of course, limited to biological women. And it sounds like I'm being really patronizing in saying this, but this is how mad that we have got. Maternity care wards, for example. You've got the NHS putting out statements about pregnant people as opposed to pregnant women. That you shouldn't politicise healthcare, because I think it's just so completely important. But the problem is the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, is in coalition with the Green extreme colleagues, and I think she'll ruin such vital data just to pander to a minority of activists seeking to deny truth by refusing to acknowledge biological reality. And I think it just goes to show how far.
The activists are setting the agenda, Darren. That is the problem, isn't it? They've got a very small but loud and powerful minority who are setting the agenda.